Hello everyone, my name is Anishana and today I'm coming up with new topic that is Ingress Controller. Agenda of today topics are refresher of Kubernetes services. In this we will talk about cluster IP, node port and load balancer. As Ingress resources is used services, thus it is important to know the Kubernetes services. If you are comfortable with Kubernetes services, then you may jump to the next section. Then we will talk about what is Ingress, why we use Ingress, type of Ingress controller in the market, what is ingress resources, and also we will discover the difference between controller and resources, as this question most probably asked in the interview questions. Then how to implement host based, path based and terminate SL traffic. So let's jump into our first topic, that is cluster IP. In cluster IP we can create the deployment or services from the manifest file, also called as declarative, or from the command line. It is called imperative. Here I have taken the manifest file as an example. The name of the service is Nginx deployment CKA cluster IP, whatever you want, you can take it. And the type is cluster IP and the port number is 8080 and target port is 80. And the same thing for the deployment, this is the basic deployment that I'm using here. It has two replica and this service will capture the ports which has the label app equal to devops-wala.com-cka. As this label is set in this deployment, thus all the ports which are running inside this deployment all should have app equal to devops-wala.com -ck. If we execute this command kubectl get port -o void, we will observe that we have two ports are running. After that we can execute kubectl get service and then service name. We will observe that this is a cluster IP address and it is allocated one IP address here. Also, we can use kubectl get service -o YAML. In this way, we will get more information. Let's talk about how this cluster IP will work. This is my Kubernetes cluster, and inside this Kubernetes cluster, I have two worker nodes, not master node, two worker nodes. And inside this, we have one service, and the name of the service is this, and it is mentioned here. After that, it allocate the IP address that we call specs.cluster IP. And same thing you will observe here, specs cluster IP address. It has the port number 8080 that we call specs ports 0 port. This is what here, specs ports port 8080. Once this service get the request or get the traffic on this port number, it will forward it to deployment ports. And here this port is specs ports target port. This is my target port 80. This is how cluster IP works. So let's talk about node port, our second service. We can create one file like previously. API version is v1, kind is service, and the name of this service is this one, node port, whatever you want to name it. Inside the spec section, we have selector app equal devops-wala.com, and same thing we have mentioned in our deployment manifest file. The type is node port. Previously it was cluster IP. After that, ports 8080, but here one more line is added, that is node port. We can define our static port, but bear in mind that you need to check this port whether it is free or not before creating this node port number. After that, we can use kubectl apply this manifest file and also this deployment. Once we deploy, the node port service also create the cluster IP address. I will show you in a couple of more minutes. If we execute kubectl get port, we will see the cluster IP address. You can see here, and the port number is 8080, and it is bind with 31001 in TCP port number. Also, if we use -o YAML file here, we will observe more information here. So inside this spec section, we have ports that is bind with node port. This is my VM port number, and this is my VM IP address. This is my node VM IP address. So request will go to this VM on this port number. Once it receive, it forward the traffic to this cluster IP address with this port number, and after that it will go to the port here. Same as it is for the second worker node. If you're using this second worker node IP address, it will forward. It will use 31001 port number, and it will forward to here. So in this case, both worker node or worker node 2, you can use any IP address. It will forward the request to the port at the end. So what we understand from this here, that when we create the node port, it also creates the cluster IP address. It's a above layer of cluster IP. Now talk about load balancer. This is our third service. Again, we can create a services here. So this time the name of this service is this one, CKLB. Inside the spec section, we have app. Again, we capture the port which are mentioned in the deployment, and the type is load balancer. You will not observe node port number here. That will remove because we use type equal to load balancer here. Once we apply the services, and we can use -o YAML file, we will observe these output here. And here you will observe cluster IP address. It means that this load balancer service also create cluster IP service, and the node port is 30794. What it means that if we create the load balancer service, it will create the cluster IP address on the top of that node port service, and then load balancer services at the top. And here the status is load balancer and empty. The reason behind is that we are not using as of now the external load balancer. If we execute this command kubectl get service and service name, we'll observe that external IP address is pending here. We will observe the IP address once we install the external load balancer. In cloud environment, you can use the load balancer whatever you want. If you want to go with AWS or Azure, you can take the load balancer services, and then that load balancer will offer one IP address, and after that you will see here. In my lab, I created the load balancer metal LB. This is not the public one, so this is what we can install in the our premises. Okay, so let's move ahead. I have already covered, so this is just a refresher of services. I have already uploaded one video in which I have already explained what are these services and what are the difference between here. Here I'm just going to refresh, that's it. And if you are interested to know what is services in Kubernetes, this is the topic of my video. You can observe in my playlist, Kubernetes playlist. And metal LB, so in order to install the metal LB, you can use this YAML file, and after that L2 advertise and then IP address pool. From this pool, I will get one IP address to my load balancer services. Here you will see once you create all these stuffs. Again, if you execute this command, you will observe one IP address that is being allocated by the my metal LB load balancer. And if you are using cloud load balancer, then you will observe the IP address from that load balancer. And I have already explained that how to install the metal LB in my video, so you can watch that video. It would be good. Today topic is Ingress, so it's just a refresher that what is cluster IP address, node port, and load balancer. That's it. And here, this is my pod here, and this is my metal LB, which is offering 1.100, and it's run off 8080 port number. So it forward the traffic to both of the worker nodes, and after that these worker nodes, as I said, that load balancer services will also create the node port services, so it will forward the traffic to this port number here, and then the IP address, it will use this one for both, and after that it will forward the traffic to the cluster IP address on this port number, and then the service will forward the request to this port on port number 80. I hope it is clear now how we are using Kubernetes services. Let's take an example that if we want to expose multiple deployment, then we need extra load balancer. Like here, so I need to create another load balancer, external load balancer, and then it will forward the packet to this different port number for this IP address, and then it will forward to new cluster IP address, and then these will forward to new ports. It means that if we have two deployment, then we need to create two load balancer. If we take the cloud services, then they charge for each load balancer. It means that it costs us. Kubernetes come up with one solution. You can use Ingress, and with the help of Ingress, we will use only one load balancer services. It means that we can save some money, right? And downside of load balancer services are couple of the very first one is the Kubernetes load balancer services is used for L4 load balancing, which means it is done at OSI layer 4 transport layer. The load balancer can make the decision based on TCP UDP protocol only, right? Application that use HTTP or HTTPS protocol often require L7 load balancing, which is done at OSI layer 7 application level, right here. The L4 load balancer cannot do HTTPS traffic termination and offloading because it is for transport layer. You cannot terminate HTTPS traffic again. You cannot implement name-based virtual hosting using the same L4 load balancer for multiple domain names. You need an L7 load balancer to implement path-based or name-based virtual hosting. In Kubernetes, you can resolve all these problems using an ingress object, which can be used for implementing and modeling L7 load balancing. The ingress object is used for defining the routing and balancing rule only. For example, which path should be routed to which Kubernetes services. That's it. We'll talk about more, don't worry. Now, what is ingress? We will cover the theory part, no worries. Okay, so first we will deploy the ingress controller. It can be any of them. It is totally up to us which one is suitable as per our requirement. I will talk about in detail, no worries. Just to start with very basic one. Nginx is a widely adopted ingress controller offering robust features and scalability. HP proxy is reliable and high performance. Ingress controller used for load balancing and routing in Kubernetes cluster and so on. Plus, we need a we need to configure the rules. This is what we call ingress resources. It is a simple YAML file. Now you understand the difference between ingress controller and ingress resources. Ingress controller are these one, Nginx, HA proxy, whatever. I will cover the theory part, don't worry. Plus the rules that will this ingress controller will read the rules and forward the traffic with the help of this ingress resources. So in an interview, it may ask that what's the difference between ingress controller and ingress resources. For now, you understand that ingress resources are the configuration rules or rules that we applied on ingress controller. Okay, so what is ingress controller? In Kubernetes, you can solve all these problems using an ingress object, which can be used for implementing modeling 7 load balancing. Ingress not come by default when we create a Kubernetes cluster. An ingress controller is a Kubernetes controller that is deployed manually to the cluster, most often as a daemon set or deployment object that run dedicated port for handling incoming load balancing and smart routing. Ingress object is used for defining the routing and balancing rule only. For an example, which path should be routed to which Kubernetes services. It is responsible for processing the ingress objects which specify that especially want to use the ingress controller and dynamically configure real routing rules. From all these points, we can say that the Nginx ingress controller or any ingress controller in a Kubernetes component for routing external traffic to Kubernetes pod. It offers powerful features and benefit for managing ingress traffic effectively. So now you understand what is ingress controller. If in interview, if someone asks you what is ingress controller, just read from here to there. That's it. And what is ingress resources? It is defining the routing and balancing rules only. That's it. This is the absolute answer for me. As I mentioned that there are multiple or different ingress controller. If you go to Kubernetes website, you will observe that these are the different type of controller available as per the Kubernetes official documentation as of 2nd May 2024. So there are different type of ingress controller in the market. Needless to say that I will add this URL in the description of this video. So let's discuss some theory of ingress controller and resources more. As I said that we can segregate the traffic on the basis of host base or path base, right? So what is this? Host base means example.com and devops-wala.com or course.devops-wala.com. So as you can see here that FQDN is changes. That is called host based, and for path based www.devopswala.com, and if we use www.devopswala.com/ck and ckad in path based, we have the same URL, or you can say that we will have the same FQDN, and after this FQDN we will have some different subdirectories like CKA or CKAD. To remember this, one can use prefix and suffix. English words are there. So prefix are when we add or change at the beginning of the words. It is called host based routing. At the beginning of the words, it is host based. And suffix when we add some words in the end of URL or end of FQDN, it is called path based. This is the simplest way you can learn this thing. Now talk about what is SSL example. For SSL, it terminate the HTTPS traffic and forward it to HTTP. Just imagine that your customer end user is typing https colon slash slash www.devopswala.com. For them, it is a encrypted traffic. When it open the website, it will be encrypted. So this is what HTTPS comes in the picture. We'll talk about no worries. Now we know what is ingress controller and ingress resources. Now it's time to know that how to install the Nginx controller. Why I am saying Nginx controller? Because it is not possible for me to create videos for each and every controller, and Nginx is more popular, so I'm also generating the video on this Nginx controller only. You can go to the official documentation of kubernetes.github.io page and click on bare metal. The reason behind is that I'm using metal LB, so I'm using this bare metal. After that, in order to install the Nginx controller, you just use this command. That's it. This is the YAML file. Will create many objects. We will see in the lab section, but for the theory part, I will cover some of them. The very first one is namespace. It will create ingress Nginx. All the objects will be created inside this namespace only. So if you delete this namespace, it means that you also deleted the Nginx controller. After that, it creates the service account with the name of ingress Nginx. You can execute this command kubectl -n ingress Nginx describe service account, and the name of this service account is this one. This is the same one, and you will see some labels are added attached to this service. That's it. And one can observe that this service account is created inside this namespace only. Okay, that's it. After that, so when you execute this command, you will also create config map, and the name of the config map is this one. And if you execute this command, get config map ingress nginx controller, you will observe that one. And if you describe this, it is says nothing. No data is available here. But yes, you can add the nginx configuration file as per your requirement. So for that reason, they have already created the config map. So you just need to update this config map if you want to update the some rule of nginx configuration file. After that, it also create the cluster rule and cluster rule bindings for the security reasons. And that is if you use describe cluster rule and ingress nginx. And also please bear in mind that cluster rule is not namespace object. This is the reason I have not used here minus n nginx ingress nginx. And you see that all these objects list and watch only, but it can create the events. That's it. It can only create the event, and rest of the other stuffs it can get and list. And if we describe the cluster rule binding, we'll observe that this is using the service account that we created previously inside this namespace. That's it. After that, it also create rule and rule binding. So this is the rule and this is the, it can create two things. It can create lease and event. That's it. And for role binding, it is a namespace object. So I used here, and it is also using service account. Nothing more than this. And for that reason, it created for service account. Also, it create the webhook services, and inside this webhook services, again, it create the config map, cluster rule, and rule binding. I'm not going to go here. So ingress basic example. Now we understand that what is ingress and what is ingress rule and how we install the ingress controller. Let's take an example of very basic one. This is my Kubernetes cluster here, and inside this I have two nodes, whether you can say node or worker node, whatever. And inside this we have one deployment which is having two replica of pods. Further, we created the cluster IP address which is forwarding the traffic to this deployment. After that, we create the ingress controller, and obviously we need to create the ingress resources to create the rules. Once that rule match, it forward the traffic to this cluster IP address. And this ingress controller will get the IP address from the external load balancer. And for this lab, I'm using Metal LB. But for your condition, if you're using cloud, it will be different one. And it will forward request to ingress controller. This is the very simple and basic example. Now I have logged in into my GitHub page. If I click on repository, click on Kubernetes. If I scroll down, I would see that 14 ingress controller or nginx controller. Now we have 5 labs that we need to perform here. The very first one is basic one. First, we need to create the Metal LB load balancer. I have already done this, so I'm skipping this part here. And now we need to create the deployment which has our server content. It is a very basic deployment that we are going to create here. Let me create one directory here, mkdi/theta, and then go to this directory, paste over here. The deployment name is devops-wala.com, and image is nginx, replica is 2, and port is 80. After that, we need to expose this deployment with one service, and the name of this service is service basic. This one. Let me copy and paste it over here. After that, we can check the services, kubectl get services, and I'm going to create all these objects on default namespace. Now we can create the nginx controller. Now we are going to create the nginx controller here, ingress controller, but we are using nginx here. So this is the reason I'm repeating nginx controller. And there is only one command. Let me paste over here, clear the window and hit enter. As stated in my theory part that it will going to create many objects. First, it is created the nginx ingress nginx namespace, and then service account, rule pack, role binding, cluster rule, and config map, and one webhook server. Okay, so now it is created here. So let's go back to here and let's check if all ports are running fine or not. It takes some time here, so I'm putting here W. Now it is created here. Let me control C. We can check the services of this Nginx and external IP is pending here. Let me check here kubectl get namespace. Okay, so I need to wait for more minutes here, or maybe I need to add the metal LB load balancer here. Let me create the load balancer configuration here. It is created here, and after that I need to check if everything is working fine or not here. Container creatings. Let's wait for one more minutes. Now all are running, up and running. After that I need to create L2 advertisement here, and then the second file is for IP address pool here. Sometime it gives error here, sometime not. It is created here. Both are done. Let me check the services here now. It should get the IP address from my external load balancer, that is metal LB. Now you can see that external IP address is allocated here. After that, I will add this IP address. As of now, I don't have a DNS entry and it is a private IP address. So I'm just adding my etcd host file that this IP will resolve this name, or you can say that this name will resolve to this IP address, vice versa. It is added here. You can also check the external load balancer IP address. So I just added one command here for you. So it will add this IP address. Instead of this IP address, you can use this variable name in your file. It's time to create the ingress rule, ingress resources. Here we are going to open the fqdn devops-wala.com, and it should redirect the devops-wala.com deployment pods. And the syntax would be kubectl create ingress resource name and hyphen hyphen rule slash host name, that is fqdn, and the path ckd whatever equal to service name and then port number. And if you want, you can use TLS or secret. For now, execute this command is kubectl create ingress, and my ingress name is devops-wala1, and hyphen hyphen class is nginx. If we are running multiple ingress controller, then we can use hyphen hyphen class ingress, so that we can mention hyphen hyphen rule devops-wala.com service. Don't worry, this is the basic lab. In my coming slides, I will create this ingress rule with the help of manifest file. Let me copy here, paste it over here. It is also created here. Let's describe this ingress resource. Now one can see that the namespace is default and the name of this ingress resource is devops-wala1. And if we try to open this devops-wala.com, then slash means no path, only this fqdn only, and then it will forward the request to this service on port number 80, and beneath this service these are the port's IP address, and it will forward to port number 80. Okay, so let me do curl here devops-wala.com. If I hit and welcome to nginx, it means that I have created the ingress rule successfully, and my ingress controller is also working as per my requirement here. The first one is completed. Let me clear the lab here, and here I'm going to delete the ingress resources and then services and deployment what we created in this lab, and also I'm going to delete the ingress controller. Sometimes people say that how to create the ingress controller, but they forget to mention that how to delete the ingress resources. The same command I'm using here, but instead of apply I'm using delete option. That's it. And in this lab, I'm not going to delete the metal LB load balancer services. because I will use in my coming lab. Let me hit enter. The second one is path based. Let's take an example that we have one deployment, and inside this deployment we have two pods, and the name of this deployment is Kubernetes-course, and this is a different deployment which is having CK exam, and this is for CKED exam. Each deployment will have its own service IP address exposed. You can say that this service is exposed to this deployment. It means that this service will forward the request to these two ports only. And this is my metal LB load balancer external, and this will forward the request to my ingress controller that we created previously. After that, we will write the ingress resources manifest file, you can say that, or YAML file. And if the request coming for devops-wala.com, it will forward the request to this service. And if it's request for /CKA, it will forward to here. And if it's request for devops-wala.com/CKAD, so it will forward the request to this deployment. This is what we will in the lab section. For lab 2, I need to click on path basic here, and here the metal LB configuration is already there. I'm not going to perform. If I go to my PPT here, I need 3 deployments and 3 services. Let me create 3 deployment. All these 3 deployments are basic one. On port number 80, replica 2. One deployment name is devops-wala. The second one is for CKA, and the other one is for CKAD. Now paste it over here. 3 deployments are created. Now we need to create the 3 different services, and we are going to create the cluster IP address. If we not mention anything here, hyphen type, it means that it is going to create cluster IP. That's it. 3 services exposed with this deployment. If we execute this command kubectl get services, I should see 3 new services here. After that, we need to create the nginx controller here. So let me create the nginx controller again here. All are created here. Let me check the ports are working. It takes some time, as I mentioned previously. In the next lab, I'm not going to delete the ingress controller so that I can save some time. Now it is also working here. We should have a new services called ingress nginx controller. Yes, this is the case, and it should be namespace ingress nginx, and this is the IP address offered by my metal LB load balancer. So I have no public IP address, but I have already added here. Let me check. In the previous section, yes, devops-wala.com is already here. Now it's time to create the ingress rule, ingress resources. Last time we created the ingress resources with the help of command line, and now we are going to create with the help of manifest file. The API version is networking K8 version v1. Kind is ingress. Name whatever you want. Annotation is nginx. And please bear in mind that, and this point is very important, that you need to use this annotation if you use path base. This lab is for path base. So here I need to use this annotation. If you're not using this annotation, it will not work for you. In the spec section, in the rule, we have host devops-wala.com. Inside this host, we have HTTP and then path, and path type is prefix. Exact, there are 2 types. Path is slash, so it means that it will use devops-wala.com FQDN only. In the backend, the service name is this. It will, if we request this URL, then it will forward the request to this service. And the port number is 80 here. And for the second path type, the path is CKA/CKA. It means that devops-wala.com/CKA. If user use this FQDN, then it will forward the request to this service on port number 80. And if user use CKAD, then it should forward the request to different service. Let me copy. It is created now. And this time I'm using cat eof end of file pipe kubectl apply. So I'm not going to create any file here. So it is directly create the object for me. Let's describe this. Now in the host section, I will observe only single fqdn. This is what I mentioned in my ingress resource file. devops-wala.com path is slash. If the request is coming to this, it will forward to this service, and if it's for CKA, then it should forward to CKA service, and if it is for CKAD, then it will forward to CKAD service. All ports are having different IP address because we have different deployment. Now let's do the post checks one by one. devops-wala.com, it is working fine. Welcome to Nginx. That's great. Let's do for CKA. Again, I see welcome to Nginx. And if I use CKAD, then again I will observe welcome to Nginx. It means that we created the path-based routing. Let me delete the first one, that is all the services and deployment. And this time I'm also deleting the etcd host entry, devops-wala. And accidentally I copy also this ingress controller, so I have to create the nginx controller again for my third lab. No issues. The second one is host base. In this again we are going to deploy a two deployment. One is for Kubernetes schools, the other one is for example deployment here, and both deployments will be exposed by separate or dedicated services. And here this is my metal lb load balancer. It will forward the request to ingress controller, and then we'll create the ingress resources. If this ingress resources match that request is coming for devops-wala.com, then it will forward the traffic to this services, and if it's for www.example.com, then it will forward to this service only. Let's do the lab here. Just for your information that I have also one website for devops-wala.com, and if you click on Kubernetes, if you go for CKA exam, you will observe some questions for CKA, and if you looking for certification for CKAD, then you can look for this link. And if you want to go for all Kubernetes courses, all these videos I have already uploaded on my YouTube channels, and I'm also going to create the blogs per pages for this. And if you are not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to my channel and share my videos with your friends and colleagues. It will help me. For the third lab, I need to click on different URL basis. It means host based. Metal LB configuration, I have not deleted the metal LB, so I skip this part here. Now I need to create two deployment. Let me copy and paste it over here. Create two services and expose these deployments. Done. We can check the services here. kubectl get services. Now both services are created. Now again I need to create the nginx controller here. Paste it over here. It takes some time. Windows minus W for watch. It is also created here. That's great. And now I can use to know my ingress external IP address. You can use this command here. Now this time I'm going to add two URL here. One is for devops-wala.com, the other one is www.example.com, and this is the variable which is having the IP address, and it will append in etcd host file here. So I just copy here, paste it over here. It's time to create the ingress rule. We can also create the ingress rule with the help of command line that we did here last time. Now this time I'm using two time rules, hyphen rules. The first one is for devops-wala.com equal to my service name colon port number. Again I'm using hyphen rules and minus o YAML dry run. So it will not going to create ingress resources, but yes, for hyphen dry run, it just print out Now we can see that the first host name is devops-wala.com. The second host name is www.example.com. Now we can create, this is for your information. Now I'm going to create this ingress resource. Again, I can describe to this ingress resources here. Now I see two host name devops-wala.com. It will forward to here, www.example.com. It will forward to this. Pretty easy. Let's do the post checks. It is working fine. And if I hit on www.example.com, it is also working fine. It means that host base is also completed here. Let me copy the first one and also delete the host entry. Set minus I, D is for delete. It will look for devops-wala.com line. Once it find it delete, and minus I is for insert mode, and it will look for etcd host file. Hit enter. If I use etcd host, I should not see the DevOps entry here. Okay, so this time I have not deleted the ingress controller here. The third one is SSL. You can obtain an SSL certificate from the certificate authority CA or use a service like Let's Encrypt, which provide free SSL certificate. The easiest way is to use self-signed certificate. I will use this method on my lab. Obtaining Kubernetes Ingress SSL or TLS certificate. The basic requirement for Ingress TLS is a TLS or SSL certificate. One option is self-signed certificate. The TLS certificates created and signed by own certificate authority. This option is more useful for development environments where you can share the root CA with the team so that the browser can trust the certificate. I will cover this option. Purchase an SSL certificate. You need to buy an SSL certificate from the well-known certificate authority trusted by browser and operating system for production use case. The third option would be use Let's Encrypt certificate. Let's Encrypt is a known profit trust certificate authority that provides free TLS certificates. Now, how to generate? Generate a self-signed certificate and private key. The famous command is open SSL request, and here I will key out is TLS key and the out is TLS search. So this command will generate a key and certificate. After that, we can create a secret with the name of TLS secret, and it will use this key. And for certificate, it will use this file. Let's take an example. We have again one deployment that is exposed by one services, and it will forward the traffic to this port. And we have one load balancer which will forward the traffic to Nginx controller. Let's take an example that we are using cloud load balancer. So in the cloud, we will receive request with this load balancer, and then it will forward the traffic with encrypted traffic to this Nginx controller. And then this Nginx controller will see the ingress resources. And if it's match, it will forward the traffic to this service. This user forward the request https devops-wala.com. It will forward the traffic to load balancer. Load balancer will forward the traffic with encrypted traffic with Nginx controller here. In this Nginx controller, if we execute this command kubectl -n ingress nginx get pod, you will observe that one pod is running. And further, if we check the Nginx configuration of this pod, cat etc nginx.conf, you will observe one block that is SSL certificate by Lua block certificate. What it means? It means that the certificates are not listed in the Nginx configuration file. The Nginx controller load the certs means certificate and key into the shared memory area when it processes the Nginx definition and this Luna script in nginx.conf file. Get the cert from the cert cache when the request is processed by the Nginx. We'll create the ingress resources. In this ingress resources, we have already created the secret here. and this secret will add in the spec section of TLS. It means that when we create these ingress resources, this information is cached in the operating system, and then it will check the secret certificate and key is good, then it will forward the traffic to services. I will show you in the lab, don't worry. In my case, it is a load balancer that is created inside the cluster. So here it will forward the request like this way. So let's go to SSL termination here. Metal LB already configured here. In order to achieve SSL, we need to create the TLS key and certificate. With the help of this command, we can create the file here. As of now, there is no file created here. Now TLS key and TLS search file are created. Now we can use secret, TLS secret, and the secret type is TLS. Key and file is here, already exist. So I created when I created this lab. So let me delete this one for you. So now it is created again. No issues. Create deployment which has our server content. Same thing. In the advanced section, I will create the deployment with the help of config map. Stay tuned with this. Okay, so let me expose these services here. Get services. No, the service is also created here. Nginx controller we have not deleted. So let's see. Still we have Nginx controller is running here. That's great. And we have already set this name here. So maybe for your sake of copy paste you can do, but I don't require this one. But it's nothing harm to execute this command here again. devops-wala.com. Now it's time to create the ingress rule, ingress resources. We can also create the ingress rule with the help of command line. Yes, I know. So let's create the ingress. What it says, the API version is same, in kind is ingress, metadata, spec section. Inside this spec section, we have one block here for TLS. The host name is devops-wala.com and the secret name is TLS secret that we created in the above section here. Let me show you. It is here. TLS secret. Okay, let me move forward. Ingress class name is Nginx, rule all same. These values are already we used, so no need to explain it again here. But in for SSL we need to add this section here. That's it. Copy and paste it over here. It also created. Let's describe this ingress rule here. It says devops-wala.com. It will forward to here. In the TLS section, we use TLS secret terminate devops-wala.com. Fair enough. To open the FQDN curl, now this time we are using HTTPS. It says curl failed to verify the legitimation of the server. So what we can do here, we can use -k and -v we can also use to see if the TLS is certified or not. Yes, it is working fine. Connected to devops-wala.com. This is what it is mentioned. It is connected and you see TLS. Subject server certificate is here. Start date, expiry date, it is mentioned here. It is for 1 year. It means that SSL is also completed. Congratulations. Let me delete the deployment and services and also delete the DNS entry from the etcd host file. In the advanced section, I will add host base, path base, and SSL all club in one file. I will show you directly in the lab section. For the advanced lab, what we are going to do here, so we will club all. What means all? Host base, path base, and SSL. All these three will be created inside one ingress controller resources. Sorry. We'll update the Nginx configuration file with the help of config map and volume so that we can see the page clearly. As of now, we just see the Nginx web page, right? So let me create the file again. For this, let me remove the existing file here. This is what I forget to remove, but I will add. Now here I'm going to create search and key file here, and then create the secret with the help of this file. Let me clear the window, and then create a new deployment and consume this config map here. So first we need to create a namespace full course. This time we are going to create the ingress resources on full namespace. Whatever the namespace you want, create the namespace here, and we can also create the secret inside this namespace also. So let me copy here and minus n full course. The secret is also created inside this namespace. Now we are going to create one index file. It will open devops-wala.com. This is just an index file that we are going to create here. This is the index file that I created here. Okay, let me clear the window here. Create the config map from this newly created index file here, and I will consume this config map in the deployment. Now here I'm going to create one deployment with the help of manifest file, and if I scroll down, I will observe that volume mount USR say engine HTML, and it is consumed by this config map that we created. Kubernetes core speech. This is what we Kubernetes core speech. This is what we created in the previous step. Deployment is also created here. Create a new services and expose this deployment. Okay, and here kubectl minus n full namespace expose. So it means that I'm exposing these services of this deployment which is inside this namespace, and the name of the service is service full course, and the port number is 8080. This time we are using 8080 port number for service, and target port is 80. It is also exposed. Create the Nginx controller we have already created. No need to do it again, but yes, we can check the deployment. It is running. It's good. You can also check the external IP address, load balancer, nothing. Now here I'm going to add devops-wala.com server1.example.com to FQDN will be resolved to this IP address. Let me add the entry in etcd host file here. It's time to create the ingress rule. So what we are doing here now in this ingress resources kubectl minus f ingress resources namespace is full course. The name of this ingress resource is full course.ssl. The host name is devops-wala.com server1.example.com, and the secret it will use TLS secret. So both FQDN will use this TLS secret. The host file is slash and server1.example.com. And if we look this rule for this FQDN devops-wala.com, it will forward the request to service full course. And if we try to open this FQDN server1.example.com, it will again forward the same service. It means that if end user open server1.example.com, it will forward the request to this service, and if this open this, it will forward to this service. Simple. To FQDN is pointing to same deployment. Okay, so let me create this ingress resources. It's time to do the postx here. So here I'm using -k. Now I can see the web page of CKAD course, and if I will use server1.example.com, let me move forward here. Again I will see the same content, and both are using secure SSL. Now for CKA course we need to create a index file, then we will create the config map, the same thing that we did for above. So this time I'm using empty the index.html file, and then I will forward add, or you can say that append this CKA course file here. After that, it will create the config map inside this full course namespace. After that deployment, again it will be created inside this full course namespace, and it will consume this config map that we created in the above step. After that, we will expose the services, and the name of this service is SRV CKA. Port number is 8081 and the target port is 80. And then again we'll add this ingress rule here. In this ingress resource rule, I added these lines only: path slash CKA prefix, and then it will forward the request to this service CKA, and the port number of this service will be work on 8081. Let me go up and copy all these commands in a single step and paste it over here. Let's do the post checks minus K and CKA. I see the CKA exam. If I put here CKAD, okay. Now for CKAD codes, again we will do the same. So I just copy and paste it over here. For this CKAD, I have created another page here. Paste it over here. And for ingress resources, it configured. It's not created because we have already ingress resource file is there. And for this, I just edit this link. That's it. Let's do the post checks. For devops-wala.com/CKAD, I will observe CKAD index file. For CKA, I should see CKA config file. For devops-wala.com, I should see full Kubernetes course. If someone use server1.example.com, then I should see the same web page that I use for CKAD. This is my advanced question. I hope you like it, and also if you want, you can also go devops-wala.com. Kubernetes course is here, and as of now I have not added the ingress controller page here, so soon I will add the ingress controller page also in my website. And let me tell you one thing here, that if you are looking for CKA exam or CKAD exam, I have already uploaded my videos here. So please watch these videos if you are go for this certification. And this ingress controller, I hope you will observe a lot of questions in the interview section. And for CKA, these are the videos that I have already uploaded here. Before the interview, please watch all my videos. If you have any questions, you can ask me in the comment section. I will update you. I hope you like this video. Please don't forget to share my videos or playlist with your friends and colleagues. It will help me and other colleagues also. Thank you. Bye bye.